involving a quarterback. Ian, what can you tell us?
That's right. Sam Darnold, the Jets starting quarterback for the last several years, is now headed to the Carolina Panthers. The two teams have agreed to terms as far as the trade compensation. It's a 6th-rounder this year, and then in 2022, a 2nd-rounder and a 4th-rounder. And this one makes a lot of sense for a lot of reasons. First of all, as we talked about on NFL Now earlier today, it really was the Carolina Panthers, a team, the #1 team who had the unsettled quarterback situation, really the only team to possibly trade for Sam Darnold. And, you know, if you're the Jets, your options were keep both quarterbacks, which was probably unlikely, certainly not something that anybody wanted to happen, or wait until after the draft for someone who did not end up getting a quarterback. The choice the Jets made right now were, one, deal Darnold, make sure you know you had a market for him, get a team where you can have a realistic landing spot. They obviously did that with the Carolina Panthers. And then it's pretty clear they have seen enough in their quarterback evaluations to feel comfortable in knowing what they're going to get at the #2 overall pick. Everyone believes it's going to be Zach Wilson. Now they can just talk about it, analyze it, do whatever they want to do, knowing that Sam Darnold is not going to be there. He now lands with the Carolina Panthers. The other part of this, the Panthers were big into the Deshaun Watson situation. Certainly seems that as of right now, they have pivoted off of Watson and moved on to Sam Darnold.
So that at least closes, Ian, in your opinion, that aspect, the Deshaun Watson aspect for the Carolina Panthers. But in the value, right, a 6th-round pick in this draft, future 4ths and 2nds, which you adjust the value there because they're in the future. Is that definitively saying that Sam Darnold is the quarterback here in 2021?
The value itself is not definitively saying that Sam Darnold is the quarterback. And the value actually is more saying that the Josh Rosen trade probably set the value for what a first-round pick who didn't quite pan out like you thought, what that guy should be worth. And, of course, at that point, it was a 2nd-rounder and some change. This, a future 2nd-rounder and a couple other picks. That goes from the Carolina Panthers to the Jets, who, of course, now amass even more picks. The other part of this, and there's a couple different attachments to this trade here. What happens to Teddy Bridgewater? And my understanding is the Carolina Panthers are going to look to move Teddy Bridgewater, trade him somewhere else. We can have a solidify himself as a backup, or maybe even a chance to start in a situation, or he would potentially rework his deal and stay in Carolina. My read, more likely that Teddy Bridgewater gets moved than him stay put. That is one part of it. The other part of it is Sam Darnold has the 5th-year option coming up. I would expect the Carolina Panthers, who just made an investment in the quarterback, to pick up Sam Darnold's 5th-year option. So we'll likely have 2 years left on his deal now with the Carolina Panthers.
And in the event that Teddy Bridgewater is moved and finds another spot elsewhere, the Carolina Panthers haven't changed their status within the top 10. Is there a scenario where one of the 4 quarterbacks we expect to go earlier than that might be in play, and Carolina adds another quarterback in the draft? So
it's possible. I would never rule out a team taking a quarterback in the 1st round. It just doesn't seem likely. And you know, it seems like the way the draft board is stacking up, the first 4 quarterbacks are probably going to be gone in the first 4 picks, and number 4, whether it's Atlanta or whether it's trading for someone else. So how much does Carolina like that 5th quarterback to take them there? Or does someone come up over them and trade and try to get their quarterback so we could have 5 in the top 7 picks? I mean, all of these things are plausible scenarios. What the Carolina Panthers did is make sure they get their quarterback. And I know this. When Matt Rule looked at the landscape of quarterbacks, Sam Darnold was someone he really, really, really liked. So this is someone I know with, obviously the head coach has a lot of sway in that organization. This is something that he is very happy with.
And if we go back a couple of coaching searches in the past with regards to the Jets and Matt Rule and Sam Darnold, a possible connection that could have been made at that time, they get reunited at this point. And now, Ian, looking back at the trade market for Sam Darnold, was it really just Carolina? Were there any other teams interested in acquiring Sam Darnold for the Jets?
Once it became clear that the Jets wanted to do the trade after free agency, which is to say after they evaluated thoroughly all of the draft prospects, after they took a look at everyone, all the top 5 quarterbacks, who they wanted to make sure that, and again, we don't know this for sure, but it certainly seems like Zach Wilson is the guy that they are taking a very hard look at it, number 2. A lot of the teams that would have been in the market for Sam Darnold, the Bears potentially, the Washington football team potentially, those teams chose other quarterbacks. You know, the Bears with Andy Dalton, the Washington football team with Ryan Fitzpatrick. And you looked around, there just wasn't that many other landing spots. So, you know, I would imagine if it was the Jets, you know, they wanted more for Darnold. Of course, you wanted a first round. If you can't get that, you wanted a second rounder this year. This was the best deal they could make at this time with what seemed like the only real suitor available, and that's how Sam Darnold ends up in Carolina.
And now looking at the quarterback situation there in Carolina, you mentioned the option of moving Teddy Bridgewater. What's the market that Teddy Bridgewater is going into looking like, Ian? As a lot of the money, not all of it, but a significant amount has been spent at this point.
Yeah, and I think Teddy Bridgewater's got a big contract too. Remember, signed a 3-year, $20 million deal last year that has really proved extremely difficult to move. I mean, extremely difficult. Even if the Carolina Panthers would eat money, and at this point you'd imagine they would, it's still a hard contract to move. And so, you know, what you'd really be looking for is someone who would take on the contract or part of the contract. How much would Bridgewater be willing to give up, or maybe do what Nick Foles did last year, which is spread out some of the guarantee over 2 years? Potentially that's something that could work out. Nick Foles ended up doing that. So, I mean, the future is still up in the air for Teddy Bridgewater. I would just imagine, based on what I know, that it's probably somewhere besides Carolina.
So that's the future for Teddy B. Let's look over at these trade details to put it in a graphical form so everybody can see what's been exchanged between the Jets and the Panthers. Fairly simple trade, Ian. The Panthers get Sam Darnold. The Jets get a 2021 sixth-round pick, a 2022 second-round pick, and a 2022 fourth-round pick. So that is the value for a quarterback, Ian, who's seen a couple of coaches in New York, a couple of administrations, and not a lot of success over his young career. But it seems that the Panthers feel confident that he could change and they could have a lot of success together.
What we don't know about Sam Darnold is what he is, right? I mean, we know he was the number 3 pick. We know he's someone who was really highly touted coming out. He has had his moments. He's played on some terrible football teams, obviously, considering the state the franchise was in last year. Adam Gase getting fired, not a lot of talent. Just has not had a lot to work with and hasn't played great at times. He also is someone who has a lot of potential. We have no idea what Sam Darnold is going to be in the NFL. For the Carolina Panthers, they basically spent a 6th-rounder this year, a 2nd-rounder, and a 4th next year to see. Maybe he's someone who is a future franchise starting quarterback, and this is one of the best deals we've seen any team make. If he's not very good, if they're in the quarterback market again next year, okay, well, all they gave up is a 6th-rounder and then a 2 next year, which, as you mentioned, is valued a little different because it's a year away. It's basically the Carolina Panthers taking a flyer on Darnold and saying, we think we know what he is, but we really don't know, so we're going to make sure to protect ourselves, and if he's the future franchise guy, then they don't have to worry about this for a very long time.
And in terms of long time, Ian, 2021 is going to see Jared Goff, Carson Wentz, and now Sam Darnold starting in new locations. We're having discussions about a draft that could feature quarterbacks in its first 4 picks. At some point, is there a tipping point? Is there a change, Ian, in the way that quarterbacks are evaluated and seen here in the NFL as turnover is just starting to get a little bit absurd, right?
Yeah, I mean, it is, and a lot of it is because of contract reasons, right? I mean, we've seen quarterbacks get contracts really early, and maybe maybe the organization wasn't ready to commit to him, but they said, yeah, let's do this contract early and save ourselves a couple bucks in the future. We saw the Eagles do it with Carson Wentz. We saw the Rams do it with Jared Goff. We've seen it before where teams commit to quarterbacks to save themselves down the road, and in the end, they're not quite sure what they had, so they take a massive cap hit and trade him. Obviously not the case with Sam Darnold, but, you know, it's something we may see teams say, all right, unless I definitely have Patrick Mahomes or whoever, I'm going to wait to commit to the quarterback until I really 100% know. I mean, that might be one change we've seen from this year where so many quarterbacks have changed teams, and so many teams have taken big cap hits to make sure it happens.
And now we've got a look ahead, right, to a Joe Douglas administration, right, with Robert Saleh, and a start for both of them with presumably a new quarterback. We've seen the 49ers trade up to the number 3 spot. And the idea, right, is that we pretty much the idea of a number 2 overall pick at quarterback. But is there a potential change in that? Right? Are we so certain that the pick is lock solid quarterback at number 2?
Yeah, I would say we're pretty sure right now that it's going to go quarterback, quarterback, quarterback up to number 3, and presumably at 4 as well. Again, we're not sure if it's the Falcons or someone else, but I mean the onus on quarterback has been, it has been coming, and if you don't have one, then you're going to spend everything you possibly do to make sure you get one. So we've seen teams like the San Francisco 49ers trade multiple first-round picks to make sure that they get one, right? To make sure that they're in position to get one, even not knowing who it is. They like the value of 3. They're going to make sure they're in position to get 3. That's one thing that we've taken out of this offseason. If you don't have one, then you're going to spend everything you possibly can to make sure you get one. And that has caused a ton of quarterback movement this offseason. We saw a little more this afternoon.
And as you mentioned the draft in the first 4 picks, that 4th pick being the Atlanta Falcons. Was that a difficult point for the Carolina Panthers, who might have wanted to get involved in the rookie quarterback situation, but a reluctance across the division to make the trade?
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that, had Carolina been able to trade up to 4. Now, I don't know that they had a quarterback they valued at number 4. Let me say that. I'm not 100% sure on that. I knew they valued Darnold. They valued him for the course of the last week. This is someone who's been really been in their sights, but I don't know for sure they had a quarterback they valued at number 4. But yeah, there's no way that the Falcons were going to trade with the Panthers. This was the decision they made, and we're going to see how it turns out for years to come.
From years to come, but we find out, courtesy of NFL Network insider Ian Rappaport with the latest.